In January 2008, the Church of Scientology made a critical error in judgment, which resulted in a declaration of war from the internet's most infamous hacker collective, Anonymous. This was the beginning of a movement that captivated millions, and it all started right here.
Hello, leaders of Scientology. We are Anonymous. Over the years, we have been watching you, your campaigns of misinformation, your suppression of dissent, your litigious nature. All of these things have caught our eye. With the leakage of your latest propaganda video into mainstream circulation, the extent of your malign influence over those who have come to trust you as leaders has been made clear to us. Anonymous has therefore decided that your organization should be destroyed.
January 15th, 2008, just days prior to Anonymous declaring their war, a 9-minute interview with Tom Cruise leaked in which he discussed an active role in the controversial organization known as Scientology. This leaked video was recorded for internal use for the eyes of Scientology members only. According to Gawker, who hosted the file where other sites would not, it was a video of indoctrination. This interview, as well as other videos that happened to leak, were very quickly suppressed by the church, attempting to censor the freedom of information. This is exactly when Anonymous took notice and declared their war, ending with the now well-known sign-off for the shadowy organization.
We are Anonymous. We are Legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us.
Little did or could anybody know, this was the start of a reign of terror that lasted for 5 years. Anonymous became the perfect cloak under which to hide for any and all who wished to participate in digital anarchy. Some who did it just for the lulz, some who did it to send a message. One particular group rose from these ashes like a phoenix. Where it all started with Scientology, they would go on to hack some of the largest corporations on the planet, going toe-to-toe with federal government, and left a legacy of pure chaos. This is the rise of Anonymous and their war with Scientology. Prior to these events, Anonymous existed only in the minds of those who frequented the more edgy areas of the internet.
Who is this 4chan person or website?
Prior to 2008, where they did organize briefly, there was no structure, there was no goal. It was simply a collective name that people used while doing things to fuck with others. Showing up to video games with identical characters and being disruptive.
I actually have HIV, and
You were in the pool, like, right now?
Yes, ma'am.
Prank calling early internet TV shows.
I'm Xenon. Can you do a barrel roll for me?
A barrel roll?
Yeah, a barrel roll. On air.
Defacing public websites and posting the results to the growing image board of anonymous users known as 4chan. It was all just a way to have fun on the internet. After January 15th though, someone decided it was time for a change. A post appeared claiming that it was time for B, the term for the random section of the image board, to do something big. That big thing was to take down Scientology. The comment section of this post was full of people mocking the concept. A random image board cannot take down a pseudo-religion with the backing of wealthy people and an army of lawyers, said one poster. And yet, as the thread remained, it filled with more and more people who agreed. And trying to take down this pseudo-religion was exactly what they started to do. It all began with an IRC channel. Hundreds of users flooded in, speaking excitedly about the plans that they'd been thinking up. It was all going to start simple. Use popular stress testing websites to perform distributed denial of service attacks on the Scientology websites. A DDoS or DDoS as it's more commonly known, essentially harnessing massive amounts of connections, sending data to a server in order to temporarily overwhelm the provider and deny regular service, usually knocking them offline for short periods of time. This very quickly became the largest raid in 4chan history, bringing old users of the website back to participate and sparking a feel of mob mentality. Eventually, leaders started to emerge. Not in the traditional sense, because nobody would listen to an actual leader, but they were the ones putting forth ideas and rounding people up to do things. This is how the eventual Anonymous War Declaration video was created. a single man's idea, but worked on as a collective, where they would sit and laugh about how over the top it was, knowing full well that things were not going to go much further than what they always did. Just a bit of light trolling, a little bit of DDoSing, and then people would get bored and move on. But not this time. Even the organisers had no idea how far-reaching this movement was going to be. Mainstream publications picked up on the video declaring war against Scientology, and the hundreds of IRC users turned to thousands overnight. The mainstream news talking about this had essentially signal boosted what was initially going to be somewhat of a joke. The result was, ironically, the IRC servers being used by Anonymous being DDoSed with real traffic from all the new recruits who were joining by the minute. They'd heard that Anonymous was going after Scientology, and they wanted to be involved. At this point, they eventually had to split the IRC into multiple servers due to the sheer scale of what was now known as Operation Chanology. Leadership still didn't exist in any traditional sense, but there were more reputable and organised channels who would hash out the next steps, which for now was limited to figuring out which of the several DDoS tools to use and on which specific Scientology websites, as well as marketing, which meant essentially creating memes. The first big blow was struck on January 19th, where Anonymous managed to collectively bring down the Scientology main website entirely, which again caught the attention of Sky and Fox News, who in their uninformed, sensational, and laughably boomer way called this group super hackers. In reality, very few people of the thousands involved had even a remote concept of how to hack anything. They were essentially just running a program they were told to use, and that was that. Either way, the first blow had been struck, and Scientology was now responding. They talked in interviews with the media about how the hackers were cyber terrorists who were performing hate crimes against religious groups. They also employed a cybersecurity company to assist in their defense against the novice DDoS attacks of the Anonymous collective. The ball was back in Anonymous's court, and their response was protests. They'd already organised the IRC into channels based on city locations, and so they scheduled what they referred to as making the internet go outside. They used this as an opportunity for more marketing by essentially leaking protest dates and locations to media outlets, and told people to wear masks while heading to the Scientology church locations. The results of this were originally nowhere near as impactful as you would expect, but it did show a willingness within the community to really put themselves out there for this cause, which was still lacking in real direction and more of a joke than any real threat. Over the coming months though, over 7,000 people showed up across 70 different cities during the protests. Definitely not a small number, and considering the level of engagement would be considerably lower than that of the people willing to participate online, it was a scary thought as to how many people were backing this collective and just how many people were anonymous. This is also where the mask from V for Vendetta was co-opted and popularised as a symbol of Anon, which went together perfectly with their new mantra.
We are anonymous. We are Legion. Expect us.
At this stage, the more ambitious voices in the movement had started to notice the power they could wield if they were only to get organised. A French PhD student known as Hausch sent out a scout to survey each of the hundreds of IRC channels who acted as a splinter cell of the collective, finding which of the voices within commanded the most respect, then inviting them to join a more private group who would hopefully decide the future of the movement behind the scenes. Meetings began to be hosted regularly for hours at a time, but pretty soon they discovered that there was no real way to properly organise such a group. Infighting started almost immediately. The leadership group was then leaked to the masses, and generally people were bored with the low levels of impact they were actually having on the Church of Scientology. It didn't help, as well, that the FBI had already scooped up and arrested 2 people out of the thousands who had performed some of the earliest DDoS attacks some months ago, putting everyone on notice that involvement in this matter was not a joke, and there could be very, very real, life-changing consequences. In one of these cases, the church sued a college kid for $100,000 in damages for his part in the DDoS, which was eventually lowered to $20,000, which he was ordered to pay back in full. They also pushed for a 12-month jail sentence to deter others, with the lawyer claiming Anonymous resembled Nazis and terrorists. The young man did eventually plead guilty and accept a year in prison. This was the turning point for Anonymous as a collective. Anybody could join, and they could join for any reason. The barrier for entry was simple: be involved, say you are anonymous, and that's it. The concept of anonymous is ethereal, and that is exactly what scared security experts. It could be anyone, it could be everyone, and that was terrifying. This was the biggest weapon in the anonymous arsenal, but also their biggest weakness. What everyone quickly discovered was that anyone being able to claim anonymous or join the ranks could also rock the whole boat. They could do things that ruin future plans. They could be law enforcement. They could convince others to change course. They could destabilize or undermine the effort of what was now a splintered faction. Where previously it was Anonymous versus Scientology and it seemed like they were moving in the same direction, there were now two groups: those who wanted to fuck around and make memes, and those who wanted to use their power for activism. These two groups did not get along with each other at all, and if that wasn't bad enough, each group also had infighting. It was always, since the beginning, a complete mess, but now without a core focus and a fresh target in their mind, it was just pure chaos. By the end of 2008, a full year of messing with Scientology, with ongoing but diminishing protests and online attacks, the church had learned their lesson and listened to the expert advice. They were now playing dead, like an animal trying to avoid a predator. The Anons wanted to get a reaction, and in the absence of a reaction, things calmed down purely due to boredom. Where previously Scientologists would react publicly outside of protests, they now simply stopped coming outside. Where they would previously publish public statements in the media, they simply remained quiet. This seems like the end of a story, but in reality, it was the very beginning. Yes, the protests and cyber attacks against the church stopped completely, which brought an end to Operation Chanology, as well as an end to Anonymous as a singular entity with a common goal, but it was the beginning of something much bigger and much scarier. You see, what nobody knew was that in the early days of Operation Chanology, an entirely different and considerably more dangerous group had briefly taken notice of the potential of Anonymous. A collective was now forming behind the scenes, with a handful of names who would go on to perform some of the most infamous hacks on the planet against some of the largest corporations in the world. Some names that are now famous if you are all familiar with this group. Black hat hackers who didn't rely on memes and childish programs to bring down servers, instead using real skills to cause damage in the billions. And when asked why they did it all, they had one simple answer: for the lulz.